Welcome to another tutorial. This is going to be a quick one, and we're going to just look at text and how to add text to a composition. We're going to create something along the lines of this. So basically I just went online and I found a quote that was from Napoleon: "Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." So I'm just going to go to After Effects, and we don't need any external assets, we're only going to use what we can create in After Effects. So first we need a new composition, and I'm going to call it text comp, and we can use what we see here. So it's going to be 960 by 540 pixels, 25 frames per second, and it's going to be 10 seconds long. Right, first of all I want to create a background color. I don't like black, so I'm going to create a solid just to change the background color. So go to Layer, New, Solid, and just make sure that's the same size as my composition. So I'm going to hit this button and change, and just choose any color really. I'm going to choose like a darkish blue. Okay. Now I want to add some text to that composition, so I'm going to use the text tool up here and click anywhere in my composition and just type never, just the first word of my quote, and I'm just going to have a look at the character properties. If you can't see them here, you might want to go to Window, Characters to add that panel. I already have it open here. So Helvetica's fine. I'm just going to choose it to bold and make it a lot bigger. Right. And now I want to move it, but I need to make sure that I go back to the selection tool first. And I'm just going to position here. And I could literally type the whole sentence in this one text bit. So as with any other software, I could like hit enter and then say interrupt in the next line. But I want to fade them up one after another. So I want to make sure that I create one line of text in one text layer. So to create the next one, I could use the tag tool again and just click, but that's a bit, it's tedious, and I want to make sure they're all aligned on the left hand side. So I'm just going to duplicate this layer by clicking Command D to duplicate things, and then I'm going to hit Shift and just move it down, and I don't even have to change back to the text tool. I can just have the selection tool and just double click in there to change the text, and then repeat that by selecting interrupt, hitting Command D to duplicate it, and then going back to the selection tool so I can move it and just drag it down. So that's kind of our first screen of text. So now I want to make them appear one after another and kind of have them fade up eventually. But first of all, I want to stagger them in my timeline. So when I move the beginning of a layer, the beginning of all of my layers kind of further in. So I don't even want there to be text in the first frame. So I'm just going to select all three of them. So I'm going to select the first one, hit Shift, and then select the last one just to select those three layers. I'm just going to move the starting time of this layer. It's a bit further down the line. Right. So now at this point, now I want to kind of separate them out and have one appear after another. So interrupt is the second one that comes up. So I'm going to drag that somewhere around here, and then your enemy should pop up even after that. So I'm going to drag the whole layer to a later point in time. So now if I go to the beginning of the comment, hit spacebar to preview, they kind of pop up one after another. Cool. But now I kind of want them to blur in, kind of start really blurry and then become clear and visible and come into focus. So I'm just going to select my layer that's called Never, so the first text layer that comes up. And I'm going to add a blur effect to it, a very simple one. So I'm going to go to Effect, blur and sharpen Gaussian blur. And in the blurriness, I can just click and drag and just see, you know, however far I like it. That's probably good. Yeah, somewhere around there. So that's like around 30 now. Right, but that's what I want it to be when it first appears, and then I want it to gradually turn clear. So I'm just going to go to the beginning of this layer, you know, somewhere there. It kind of snaps, but there's a lot easier way to go to the beginning of a layer, which for something like this is really handy. So if I'm anywhere in my timeline, I'm right, I want to go to the beginning of this layer, all I need to do is select the layer and hit I, and that stands for layer in point. It works the same with the out point, so it's I and O, which is not very clear here because we can't really see the end of it, but maybe if I select the deep royal solid, which starts here and ends right at the very end of the comp, if I hit I, it just snaps to the beginning of the layer. If I hit O, it just snaps to the end of the layer. And that's a really handy way of navigating around your timeline. So I'm just going to select the first text layer that I just added the effect to, the never one, and hit I, just to snap to the beginning of it. So that's where I want it to be at this blur level. So I'm just going to add a keyframe here for blurriness. And I'm very visual, so I always want to see what's going on. At the moment I can't see my keyframes because it's all folded in. I would need to open the whole lot and then access the effect and then the Gaussian blur to be able to see my keyframe. But as we've done before, I'm just going to hit the keyframe U. That just unfolds all the properties that have keyframes. So if I hit U, all that unfolds is that blurriness, which is really handy. Right, and then I want to go a little bit later in my timeline, and at that point I want the never to be perfectly clear. So I'm just going to set the blurriness to 0 here. So now the way it appears kind of goes from blurry and then it snaps and becomes clearer in a short amount of time. That's probably the right amount of time. So what I want to do, I also want it to fade in at the same time. I'm just going to disregard the other two layers for now. So actually I'm going to switch them off because I'm only working on this one layer at the moment. So I'm just going to, for the interrupt and your enemy, I'm just going to click the eyes in front of the layer here, just to make them invisible, because all I care about at the moment is working on this one layer and make sure it looks good. So in addition to having those blurry keyframes, I also want to add transparency keyframes or opacity keyframes. And the way to unfold that property is simply pressing T. So I select the layer, I hit T, and I'm going to add a keyframe anyway, really. I'm just going to activate that property for keyframes because I want to see both properties at the same time that I added keyframes to. Again, I'm just going to hit U to unfold the other property as well. So now I have both my properties that have keyframes. I'm just going to move this keyframe to the same time as the blurry keyframe. Now this keyframe is on 100% opacity, and obviously I want it to fade from 0 gradually to 100. So that's the right position and time for the 100. I'm going to hit I again to jump to the beginning of the layer. And at this point I want the opacity to be 0 for it to be completely transparent. So I'm just going to drag that down to 0. And now I have 2 opacity keyframes and 2 keyframes for blurriness. And if I preview it, you know, it fades up and it becomes clearer at the same time. It's just adds a bit more to it than just popping up. Just a bit more interest. Great, so now I want to add the same animation to the other 2 text layers. So first of all I'm going to switch them back on, both of them. And of course I could do the same thing, add the effect, change the properties, add keyframes, etc, etc. But in After Effects we can literally copy and paste anything. So what I want to copy and paste is 2 things at the same time actually. So I want to copy the effect, Gaussian blur, as well as the keyframes for the opacity. So I'm going to hit Shift and also select the opacity. And it does seem like it hasn't selected those keyframes, but it has. But just to make sure, I'm just going to hit Shift and select that as well. But because it's part of the effect, it should copy it either way. So now I'm going to hit Command C to copy it. as anywhere else on your computer, Command C, Command V. So I just copied these properties, and I'm just going to go to the beginning of the next text layer. I hit I, just to snap to the beginning, because that's where I want this to start the same effect, to start fading up and kind of becoming from very blurry, becoming clearer. So I'm going to hit Command V. And then just to show you that it actually happened, I'm going to hit U, just to unfold the properties with keyframes now. And there they are, and then the same rating, the same timescale, but they will always start wherever I have my current time indicator. So if I move further along and I hit Command V, they will be pasted at this point in time. I'm just going to undo that. And now we need to do the same with the last layer, your enemy. So I'm just going to select it, hit I to jump to the beginning of it, and then paste the keyframes there again by hitting Command V. And then just press U to unfold it. So we can see everything. It's just, you know, to better know what's going on. And that's what it does when I play it back now. Really simple type animation. Just like fading up. So the last thing I want to do is, as per this video, I just want to fade them off at the same time. So they all come on 1, 2, 3, but then in order to go to the next line, I just want them all to fade off at the same time. So we're just going to add another set of opacity keyframes. So only in the opacity of all 3 layers, I'm just going to click here and add another keyframe to the opacity value. Make sure you're on opacity and not on the blurriness, which will just add another keyframe that has the same value as the one before, which is 100%, so there's no animation in between. Just going to go back to the time of that keyframe by hitting that little arrow here, and I'm just going to add a keyframe here and another keyframe there. So now I have 3 keyframes for opacity on my 3 layers. I'm just going to move a bit further back in time. And I could, you know, change each of those values back to 0, but I can also simply select all 3 layers and then drag this down to 0. And you can see that it automatically does it on all the layers that I've selected. So now all of them are 0, and now I've neat keyframes with all of them fading off at the same time. Right, and I'm not going to repeat how to do that with the second line of text. It's exactly the same process. And I'm sure you'll be able to do that on your own. It comes in the same way, it fades off. But it's exactly the same technique. So I'm going to leave it here, and I hope that all makes sense. And thanks very much for watching.